Hey guys, so this is going to be a very introductory HTML tutorial. I'll cover CSS in the next part too, but this doesn't really have any prerequisites to it. And if you have prior experience with HTML or CSS, I'd say skip right ahead. This is not going to be for you, but it's a good place to start. Obviously, I won't be covering everything there is to cover for HTML because that will take forever. But hopefully by the end of this tutorial you can learn how to do basic stuff in HTML, and you can learn how to do basic stuff by just reading documentation. Cool. So let's dive right into it. What really is HTML? So anything that you find online, any websites that you go to, are most probably written in HTML. There are other variations, but most probably they're going to be some type of combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Of course, there are like other languages that you can use nowadays and scripting languages that you can use to generate HTML on the fly and so on and so forth. But in some form, there's HTML being rendered on every page that you go to. So, for example, if I go to Google's website and I hit inspect element, everything here that you see, all this code is HTML code. If I see all the sources, there are other images, JavaScript files, all the other files that it downloaded to my browser before it rendered the Google's website. But this is the main thing. This is the main code that is being presented right now. So another resource that is really helpful for HTML is Mozilla's reference. Mozilla HTML reference is really good. It has all the element attribute references. It has really good tutorials too. So if you want to go a bit more in depth, feel free to go on this website and learn more about it. Cool. So let's start right in. So I'm not using my personal laptop, and the reason for that is right now I'm on a Mac, but I know many of you guys will be using Windows, some of you guys might be using Linux, and there might be like small differences. So I'm using Cloud9. It's like an online platform which you can go to, and so I'll open up a new tab, show you how to sign in. But it's really simple. All you need to do is create a new account. I recommend creating a new account with GitHub because all your repositories are pulled into it. And once you create a new account, I already have created one, so I'm not going to create it again. You can create a new machine, and on each machine, on each workspace, you have all your files and you can run them. So this is like completely in the cloud, and other people can work on the same thing if you want. So with HTML, there's this concept of tags. First, what really is HTML? So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. Like I said earlier, anything that's being rendered on the web page is in some form related to HTML. And HTML has a concept of tags. So everything that is presented and not presented on the page belongs to some or other kind of tag. Some of them are not presented, but some of them are presented. So let's see what that looks like. So doctype HTML, this defines the version of HTML that I will be using. Doctype HTML means I'll be using HTML5. You can use older versions, but that's not really an ideal situation because some of the features might not work, and some of the browsers also deprecate them. So if you run HTML4 on some of the browsers, they might just not render it correctly. So the first tag is the HTML tag. For some reason it created two. Okay. So your document should contain at least one, at most one HTML tag. You should never contain two or more HTML. You should never contain more than one HTML tags. Everything on your web page will go inside this HTML tag. So this is the opening HTML tag, and this is the closing HTML tag. Usually in HTML tags have their closing and respective ending parts, opening and ending parts. But there are some tags that don't need their closing part; they just go by themselves. So we'll look into some of those too. The next thing that is really important is the head tag. So head tag is all the metadata of the document. Anything in the head tag is not really presented on the screen of the user, but it is still there. So any metadata like author or encoding, sources, stuff like that, that really goes into the head part of the tag. Also, any files that you might want to pull. So for example, if you have a JavaScript and CSS file that you want to include in your HTML file, you would want to put those files in the in the head part. And the reason for that is any files that need to be pulled into your HTML code, they will be pulled before any of the code is ran if it's in the head file. So for example, if somewhere in your code you are trying to execute a function that you wrote in the JavaScript file and you haven't really pulled that code yet, the browser is not going to know what the function is, and it's just going to not render it correctly. So it is important that you pull those files before you execute anything so the rendering is complete. For the head, let's put a title in it. Title is anything that goes on here on a tab. So when you open a new tab, title goes on here. Also, so in Cloud9, you can actually run the code. So once you're in the workspace, I created an HTML5 workspace, by the way. So when you're in the workspace, what you can do is you can just go here and click run, and it would run this code, and it would give you a link. So you can go onto this link, and it would present the file that you have. So right now I don't have anything, so it's not presenting it, but if you would notice, it did say HTML tutorial as the title because I have it here. Cool. So you can have metadata tags. You can add metadata in it, for example, author. So metadata tag is not really going to show anything on here, so if I reload, nothing's going to like pop up, but it's still there. Like it would, when somebody downloads your website, like he would know that the author of this website is me in this case. I'm just going to delete this for now. Another important tag that you want to have in your HTML document is the body tag. Anything that goes in the body is usually that's represented somewhere on the screen here. There are like different things you can do with the body tag, but so like you can change the background color and so on and so forth, but we'll learn more in the CSS tutorial about that. But right now we're just going to present basic stuff and see how to do that. So anything in the body is basically that you want your clients to see. So this is basically the concept of tags. Now there are millions, or not millions, but a pretty good chunk of tags. So if you go into HTML reference, so these are all the tags that you can use. There are literally like probably 100 tags that you can use. So we'll look at some of them right now, but so like I said, like Mozilla has really good documentation. So if I want to use the div tag, I can just go read up its documentation. They even show how to use it. And for example, div creates a division of the page, so you can have different divisions, different containers, and you can change color of different containers, do animations and stuff like that. So each container would have their own animation. So let's look at some of the tags that we have. So first tag I want to look at is the h1 tag. H1 tag is the heading tag. Anything that goes in here could be presented as a heading. So this is So if I now go onto my website, I see that this is a heading tag. So the heading tags go from H1 to H6. So H2 is a smaller heading, so you can have like a larger heading and then maybe like a subtopic which has a smaller heading, and so on and so forth. So H6 is the smallest heading that you can have. So it just keeps going down. Another tag is the paragraph tag. So paragraph tag kind of separates out. So if you have a lot of text on your website, a paragraph tag will separate out that text. This is number 1. Another concept that's important is when HTML renders a document, it doesn't really see these new lines. So when I hit enter while writing the code, I get to a new line, but HTML doesn't really see that. So for example, if I delete this code right now and I say this is line 1 and I write here this is line 2, you're kind of inclined to think that when rendered on the document it would have this much space between these two lines, but that's not really the case. It's actually going to present it in the same line. So new lines on the HTML document, like when you're typing the code, doesn't really transfer on to how you want your HTML document to look like. So for that, we have a different tag, which is a BR tag. So BR tag is the break tag, and it breaks the line. So anything before and after this tag will be on separate lines. Oops, I didn't save it. There you go. Also, BR tag is an example of a singular tag. So this doesn't really have a closing tag. So similarly as HTML can't really figure out how new lines are worth, it doesn't really figure out how to put in spaces too. So if I just put a bunch of spaces here, it's not really going to put those spaces when it renders the document. So to put spaces, you kind of really just have to go the hard way. So you have to do n %nbsp and a semicolon. So this will put one space and so on and so forth. If I have 2, it'll put 2 spaces. So you can actually modify this in your CSS code to have, so instead of putting 1 space, you can put a tab, or you can put 4 spaces and so on and so forth. But we'll look more into that in the CSS tutorial. Also, so these are all tags, like these are all called elements. Excuse me. So these are all called elements, and each element can have its own properties. So for example, let's say you have this paragraph tag and you want to color it green. You can do that with something called their respective attributes. So each tag has its own attribute, and whenever you're changing stuff in CSS, that will how you'll change your styling. That's how you will take attributes from the HTML tags and you'll change those attributes to make the document aesthetically appealing. So let's see what all attributes there are. So in the same Mozilla reference, there is an attribute reference. So these are all the attributes, and these are all the elements that the attributes can work in. So for example, BG color, which is the background color, can work in body and all these other tags. So let's see how it works in body. So, and how attributes work are, you have the tag name, and inside the same tag you put the attributes. If I put BG color green, it paints the document green. Obviously, this is not very aesthetically appealing, but this is pretty much how it works. Notice that BG color doesn't really work for paragraphs. So just because it works for body does not mean that it will work for paragraphs. So let's make it yellow. That might be better. No, it's not really aesthetically appealing, but it's better than green. So for P, let's see what the P element can use. Oh, it doesn't really have attributes for P. But yeah, these are all the attributes that you can use, and these are all the elements that you can use these attributes on. So whenever you're changing, for example, you'll go into CSS and you'll say body's background color is blue. But yeah, so in this tutorial, it was just an introduction towards HTML. I hope you learned something out of it, and feel free to mess around with all these attributes and all these elements and get your hand dirty in it. In the next tutorial, we'll work on styling these documents and understanding how CSS works and how CSS really fits into HTML.